I want to get to our other major headlines tonight out of Washington. President-elect Donald Trump making a big push for his controversial pick to lead the Department of Justice, Matt Gaetz. Trump calling in his number 2, Vice President-elect Vance, to nudge his soon-to-be former colleagues. The Ohio senator with Gaetz at his side taking meetings on Capitol Hill today, trying to win over skeptical Republicans. Many of those GOP senators sitting on the Judiciary Committee tasked with vetting Gaetz before the full Senate vote. Some of them still not committing to supporting the embattled former congressman. The biggest question still outstanding is, will those senators ever see the contents of that House Ethics Committee report? The committee hearing testimony that Gaetz paid multiple women for sex and even had sex with one woman when she was underage, just 17. A bipartisan group of senators calling for a chance to review the report. But some Trump allies have been critical of the handling of Gaetz's confirmation. Lindsey Graham speaking out to reporters today.
I think Matt is a very, very smart guy, and these allegations will be dealt with in committee, but he deserves a chance to confront his accusers, and the process is turning into a lynch mob, and I'm not going to be part of that.
On the other side of the Capitol, another battle playing out over where some members of Congress can use the bathroom. South Carolina Representative Nancy Mace fighting to bar transgender women from using women's bathrooms on the Hill. A resolution directed at newly elected member Sarah McBride, the first trans woman to be elected to the United States Congress. Tonight, House Speaker Mike Johnson announcing new rules, even as he calls for all members to be treated with respect. Ryan Nobles is standing by for us on Capitol Hill with the latest on that. But first, we're going to go to NBC's Garrett Haake with the Trump team push for their firebrand AG.
Tonight, 24 hours after President-elect Trump said he was having no second thoughts about his embattled pick for Attorney General, former Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz, Vice President-elect Vance was on Capitol Hill with Gaetz for closed-door meetings with the Republican senators who will decide if he gets the job.
It's been going great. Senator's been giving me a lot of good advice. I'm looking forward to a hearing. Folks have been very supportive. They've been saying we're going to get a fair process.
Gaetz meeting with undecided Judiciary Committee member Tom Tillis.
My posture is that every nominee, whether they are Biden's in the last administration or whether they are President Trump, deserve a process.
And Missouri's Josh Hawley, who told us he's planning to support all of Trump's picks.
Are you confident Matt Gaetz has sufficient character to be the top law enforcement official of the United States?
Yeah, and I would just say for those who are concerned about that, hear from him, I think Donald Trump said yesterday, give him a shot.
North Dakota's Kevin Kramer telling us Trump has spoken to him personally about Gaetz.
This is going to be a different administration with a different style, and, we want to dismantle this bureaucracy because the American people are demanding it.
And Trump ally Lindsey Graham blasting what he calls a lynch mob against Gaetz. But critical to a growing number of Republican senators seeing that report on Gaetz from the House Ethics Committee, which met today to debate whether to release it. No decision was made.
There has been no agreement to release the report.
The committee has heard from women who say Gaetz paid them for sex, according to their attorneys, including a woman who says she was 17 years old at the time. Gaetz has repeatedly denied the accusations. The Justice Department also looked into the allegations, but ultimately closed its investigation and did not charge Gaetz. Tonight, Senate Democrats sending a letter to the FBI asking for the Bureau's complete evidentiary file on Gaetz, calling it crucial that the panel see all relevant information. As Gaetz remains the Trump pick with the steepest uphill climb to confirmation. Maine Republican Susan Collins among those appearing skeptical.
I was shocked by the nomination, given the many allegations.
And NBC's senior Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Haake joins us now from the Hill. Garrett, this is not the end of the House Ethics Committee's meetings on the Gaetz investigation. Is that right?
No, definitely not, Ellison. I think you're going to see another meeting in December, the first week of December. Several members of the committee said they have normal business to take care of. And they did vote today to continue working on this report so we could have a rehash of this conversation a few weeks from now. But we also saw some action on the floor tonight, a House Democrat introducing a privilege resolution. I won't get bogged down in the procedure, but it's kind of a backdoor way to force the committee to release the report to the entire House. This hasn't been tried in this manner in something like 30 years, and it failed then. But it's a sign of how critical Democrats in particular think it is that the allegations, the fact-finding, the research that's been done in compiling this report sees the light of day before Gaetz's confirmation hearings sometime in January. Ellison.
Right. Garrett Haake, thank you. For more on the confirmation controversies on the Hill, let's bring in Democratic strategist Amisha Cross and Carlos Curbelo, former Republican congressman and an NBC News political analyst. Carlos, let me start with you here. Are you surprised by how much political capital President-elect Trump is expending on trying to get Gaetz confirmed when he does have more than one pick that could be pretty difficult to get through the Senate?
It is surprising, Ellison, not just because of all the other nominees that obviously the president, the incoming White House, wants to see confirmed, but also President Trump has described a very ambitious legislative agenda. And by putting all this pressure on senators, it really does spend a lot of political capital. Some of these senators are going to demand other items in exchange for their votes. So Donald Trump is out of the gate spending a lot of the capital that he's accumulated. And hey, let's be fair, he had a strong victory. He's got plenty of capital to spend, but eventually it does run out, and he's spending a lot early.
Amisha, what do you think Democrats should be doing here from a strategic standpoint now that we know a decision on this report is going to be delayed?
They should be talking to Republicans across the aisle. They should be having those conversations. We know that that Gaetz does not have a ton of friends on the right either. But in addition to that, I think that they should be calling to question who this guy is, what he stands for, and to a point that was made a moment ago, there's a lot of political capital being expended here, but it's being expended here because Donald Trump is making a concerted effort to showcase how he feels about Matt Gaetz and what Matt Gaetz would mean to him, because you don't spend that type of political capital unless you know that this person will be in lockstep with all of the vengeance, all of the rhetoric, all of the steps you want to take in pursuing your enemies when it comes to some of the things that Donald Trump not only said on the campaign trail, but many of the things he said even before that campaign actually began in terms of putting a target on the backs of those who he believed wronged him in multiple levels, not only in government, but also outside of it, in the judiciary, as well as in the current Biden administration.
I mean, Carlos, you of all people know how Congress works and also know a lot of key players involved in this from your time in Congress. How do you think this ends? Do you think the majority of the Senate Republicans will ultimately be influenced by that pressure from Trump and say, OK, fine, let's confirm Gaetz?
So, look, I think the way this plays out is that report is going to get out in some way, shape or form. A strong bipartisan majority in the House want that report out. Matt Gaetz does not have very many friends in the House. If there were a vote, I think it would become public, and we'll see what the committee decides next time they meet. And I will tell you today, Ellison, there are not enough votes in the Senate to confirm Gaetz. So this is an uphill battle. I think it would be very difficult. I think the likeliest outcome is that at some point, more than 4 or more than 3 Republican senators come out and say, we're not going to be supporting Gaetz. And at that point, either Gaetz withdraws or the president decides to withdraw his name and nominate someone else.
You know, Carlos, when you look at well, actually, Amisha, let me go to you and ask first about Pete Hegseth really quickly. He is another controversial cabinet pick for Secretary of Defense. And some senior U.S. military sources have told NBC's Pentagon correspondent Courtney Cubie that Pete Hegseth showed, quote, zero leadership during his National Guard deployment back in 2020, and that the Trump transition team is accelerating the search right now for a deputy Secretary of Defense to try and stabilize the Hegseth pick. What do you make of that? And do you think we will ultimately see Hegseth at a confirmation hearing?
I think that Donald Trump has a lot of friends at Fox News, and this is somebody that he respects because this is somebody who carried the water for the culture wars every weekend for years at a time. This is somebody who has pursued anti-DEI, anti-blackness, and anti-womanhood at some of the highest levels. This is a guy who spoke the rhetoric that drove a lot of individuals to the polls to support Donald Trump because of seeing a changing America, one where competition existed that also included leveraging and seeing people in places that were traditionally held only by white males. And I think that for Hegseth, somebody who does not have the experience or the acumen to handle the role of SecDef or all the responsibilities that come with it, this is actually very sad because for the Republican Party and for Donald Trump, who went out of his way to say that he was anti-DEI, that, you know, the current SecDef, Lloyd Austin, is just a DEI hire. This is a guy in Hegseth who has zero experience. This is a guy who does not deserve to be confirmed. This is a guy who wants to turn the military on its head. And as someone who comes from Illinois, who has seen my Senator Tammy Duckworth, who lost her legs in combat. It is very frustrating that he is also pursuing this idea that women should not serve in combat roles.
Carlos, both Hegseth and Gaetz have denied allegations against them as it relates to alleged sexual assault misconduct, right? But the allegations exist. There are undoubtedly other conservative options for both Attorney General and Defense Secretary, people who have never been accused of sexual misconduct at all. Why do you think the president-elect is leaning into these two so hard when he knows there are these serious allegations against him? Why go down a road that you know is going to be particularly rocky if you have other options?
Well, Ellison, this is Donald Trump's style. He wants to do things his way. He feels validated by the election result. He feels very strong and confident, and he really does think that he can impose his will on the Republican Senate now with 53 votes on his side. So, look, I think most of the time there's great deference that's afforded to presidents in building their teams, but obviously there's a limit to that. And 53 votes is a lot, but it isn't 60 votes. So this is going to be an uphill climb, especially for Gaetz, but probably also for Hegseth and Gabbard.
All right, a lot to watch. Amisha Cross, Carlos Corbello, thank you both for your time and insights tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.